You probably think humans simply changed from dark skin to light skin over time. But that's not what happened. In fact, the story is far more surprising. The RST modern humans almost certainly had dark skin. Yet today, human skin comes in an extraordinary range of shades, from some of the darkest tones on Earth to some of the lightest. So what changed? Was it the climate, diet, genetics? Or was there something even bigger shaping our evolution without anyone realizing it? As it turns out, the answer has been shining down on us every single day for billions of years. The sun. To understand why human skin changed, we have to travel back nearly 300,000 years, long before cities, farming, or even written language. Back to a world where survival depended entirely on adapting to nature. The earliest known Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, where sunlight was intense throughout much of the year. For these early humans, dark skin wasn't just a physical characteristic. It was protection. Their skin contained large amounts of a pigment called melanin. Think of melanin as the body's natural sunscreen. It absorbs much of the sun's ultraviolet, or UV, radiation before it can damage cells. That protection mattered. Too much UV exposure can damage DNA and break down folate, a vitamin that's important for healthy cell growth and reproduction. In environments with strong sunlight, individuals with more protective pigmentation were more likely to stay healthy and have surviving children. Over thousands of generations, natural selection favored darkly pigmented skin in those conditions. It wasn't a conscious choice. Nature simply rewarded traits that improved survival. And for hundreds of thousands of years, that system worked remarkably well. But eventually, something changed. Humans began leaving Africa. And with that journey came a challenge no one could have predicted. The people who left Africa weren't setting out to change the way they looked. They were simply searching for new places to live. Some followed rivers. Others crossed grasslands. Generation after generation, small groups slowly spread into the Middle East, Europe, and eventually Asia. It wasn't a single migration. It happened over thousands of years. And with every step north, the environment became different. The days grew shorter. Winters became longer. The sun, which had once shone almost directly overhead, now spent much of the year low on the horizon. At RST glance, that might not sound like a big deal. But for the human body, it changed everything. Remember melanin? It protected the skin from harmful ultraviolet radiation. In Africa, that protection was essential. But in places where sunlight was much weaker, the same protection came with an unexpected downside. Because sunlight doesn't just warm your skin, your body also uses ultraviolet B, or UVB, radiation to produce vitamin D. And vitamin D is incredibly important. It helps your body absorb calcium, keeping your bones and teeth strong. It also plays important roles in muscle function and the immune system. Without enough vitamin D, serious health problems can develop. Children can suffer from rickets, a disease that softens growing bones and causes skeletal deformities. Adults may develop weakened bones that fracture more easily. In regions with abundant sunshine, producing enough vitamin D wasn't usually a problem. But imagine living through long northern winters, where daylight is limited and the sun remains weak for months. Now dark skin, which had been a major advantage in Africa, allowed less UVB to reach the deeper layers of the skin where vitamin D production begins. That didn't make dark skin bad. It simply meant that a trait perfectly suited for one environment was less effective in another. And that's how evolution often works. Natural selection doesn't create perfect traits. It favors traits that work best under specific conditions. Over many thousands of years, tiny genetic changes naturally appeared within populations. Most of these mutations had little or no effect. Some disappeared completely. But occasionally, a mutation slightly reduced the amount of melanin produced in the skin. In northern environments with lower UV levels, those individuals could often produce vitamin D more efficiently. That small advantage increased the likelihood of surviving, staying healthy, and raising children. Generation after generation, those beneficial genetic variants became more common. Not because anyone planned it, not because people consciously changed, but because evolution quietly rewarded adaptations that matched the environment. And here's something many people don't realize. Lighter skin didn't evolve just once. Scientists studying ancient DNA have found that different populations developed lighter skin through different combinations of genetic changes. In other words, evolution found multiple solutions to the same environmental challenge. It's a remarkable example of how natural selection can arrive at similar outcomes through different genetic pathways. But if lighter skin evolved independently in several places, that raises another fascinating question. Did every population become lighter? Or did different environments produce completely different adaptations? The short answer is no. Even today, there is no single human skin color. Instead, there's an incredible spectrum. And that spectrum tells the story of where our ancestors lived for thousands of years. Take the people who remained in regions close to the equator. In places such as Central Africa, where ultraviolet radiation remained intense year-round, darker skin continued to provide strong protection against harmful UV exposure. There was little evolutionary pressure for that protection to disappear. But populations that settled farther north experienced something very different. Over thousands of generations, lighter skin became increasingly common in parts of Europe because it helped balance the need for protection with the need to produce enough vitamin D under weaker sunlight. Yet Europe wasn't the only place where this happened. Scientists studying ancient DNA have discovered something remarkable. Different populations often evolved lighter skin through different genetic changes. For example, many Europeans today carry versions of genes such as SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, which are strongly associated with lighter pigmentation. In East Asia, however, researchers have found that lighter skin became common through a partly different combination of genetic variants. In other words, evolution didn't follow one universal blueprint. It solved the same problem more than once. Biologists call this convergent evolution, when similar traits evolve independently because different populations face similar environmental challenges. It's a reminder that evolution isn't working toward a predetermined goal. It's constantly responding to local conditions. And skin color isn't the only example. Around the world, humans have evolved many different adaptations. Some populations developed the ability to digest milk into adulthood. Others evolved genetic traits that improve survival at high altitudes, where oxygen levels are much lower. Communities living in the Arctic adapted to diets rich in animal fats. Each adaptation reacts a unique interaction between genetics and environment. Skin pigmentation is simply one of the most visible examples. But here's another common misconception. Some people imagine that lighter skin appeared almost immediately after humans reached colder climates. That's not what the evidence suggests. Ancient DNA has transformed our understanding of this timeline. For many years, scientists assumed that early Europeans quickly evolved light skin after arriving on the continent. Then researchers began sequencing the genomes of ancient skeletons. The results were surprising. Some hunter-gatherers who lived in Europe thousands of years ago appear to have had relatively dark skin despite living far from Africa. This tells us that the evolution of lighter skin was gradual rather than immediate. As farming spread across Europe and lifestyles changed, new populations mixed together and genetic variants associated with lighter pigmentation became more widespread over thousands of years. Evolution wasn't following a schedule. It was responding to changing environments, diets, migration patterns, and population mixing. That complexity is exactly what makes human evolution so fascinating. It's not a straight line. It's a branching story with countless paths crossing and reconnecting over time. And perhaps the biggest misconception of all is that skin color somehow divides humanity into fundamentally different groups. Modern genetics tells a very different story. No matter where we live today or what shade our skin is, all living humans belong to the same species, Homo sapiens. In fact, genetic differences between two individuals within the same population are often greater than many people expect. While the overwhelming majority of our DNA is shared across all humans, skin color represents only a tiny fraction of our genetic variation. It's an adaptation, not a measure of intelligence, not a measure of ability, and certainly not evidence of separate kinds of humans. That it's simply one chapter in the much larger story of how our species adapted to an astonishing variety of environments. But if skin color evolved because of the sun, why haven't all humans eventually become the same color today? The answer reveals just how dynamic human evolution still is. If evolution is still happening, then why do we see such a wide variety of skin colors today? shouldn't everyone eventually end up looking the same? Not at all. Because evolution doesn't work toward a single destination. It responds to the environment. For most of human history, populations lived relatively isolated from one another. Mountains, deserts, oceans, and vast distances meant that communities often remained separated for thousands of years. Each population adapted to the unique challenges of its surroundings. Near the equator, where ultraviolet radiation remained intense throughout the year, darker skin continued to provide excellent protection against UV damage. Farther from the equator, where sunlight was weaker for much of the year, lighter skin often improved vitamin D production. In many regions between those extremes, intermediate skin tones proved well suited to local conditions. There was no universal best skin color, only adaptations that made sense in a particular environment. Then, something changed once again. Humans became travelers. Trade routes connected continents. Empires expanded. Ships crossed oceans. In the last few centuries especially, migration has brought together people whose ancestors evolved in very different parts of the world. Today, people with every imaginable skin tone live in almost every climate on Earth. Modern technology has changed the relationship between humans and the environment as well. We wear clothing that blocks sunlight. We spend much of our time indoors. We use sunscreen to reduce UV exposure. Foods are often fortified with vitamin D, and supplements are widely available. These cultural and technological changes mean that the evolutionary pressures acting on skin pigmentation today are very different from those faced by our ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery isn't about skin color at all. It's about how similar we really are. Modern genetic research shows that all living humans share approximately 99.9% of their DNA. The difference is that nuanced traits like skin color, eye color, or hair texture make up only a tiny fraction of our genetic makeup. The features we notice RST are among the smallest differences between us. The vast majority of our biology is shared. In other words, skin color isn't evidence that humans followed separate evolutionary paths. It's evidence that one species successfully adapted to many different environments. That's one of evolution's greatest achievements. It created diversity while preserving our shared ancestry. So when you look at the incredible range of human skin tones around the world today, you're not seeing separate stories. You're seeing different chapters of the same story. A story that began nearly 300,000 years ago, beneath the intense African sun. A story shaped by migration, climate, genetics, and countless generations adapting to the world around them. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson evolution teaches us. Nature doesn't care about labels. It responds to survival. Every adaptation, from the color of our skin to the shape of our eyes, or the ability to digest certain foods, is simply another solution to the challenges of a particular environment. The next time you notice the incredible diversity of people around you, remember that every shade of skin carries a history stretching back thousands of years. Not a story of one group becoming another, but a story of humanity's extraordinary ability to adapt. Because in the end, our differences don't tell the story of how divided we are. They tell the story of how remarkably connected we have always been. If you enjoyed discovering how evolution shaped one of humanity's most visible traits, there are countless other mysteries hidden within the human body waiting to be explored. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.